We are on this fascinating journey together of discovering the strings that have been attached to Jesus, that the good news, according to Luke, cuts one at a time. Thus far, we've seen how Luke has cut the strings of tradition, commandments, privilege, and prejudice. This week, we're considering another story of Jesus that is not included in any other narrative about Jesus. It's the story of Jesus' experience with two women, Mary and Martha. In this story, Luke cuts the string of anxiety in Jesus' response to Martha. Let's just read this short story, which, interestingly enough, is right after the story of the Good Samaritan. So chapter 10 is a whopper, if you will, in the Gospel according to Luke. And he had just said, go and do likewise about the story of the Good Samaritan being the good neighbor. Then, chapter 10, verse 38, now as they went on their way, he entered a village, and a woman named Martha received him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she went to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me. But the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you're anxious and troubled about many things. One thing is needful. Mary has chosen the good portion, which shall not be taken away from her. Now, you see, Martha was ticked off at Mary for not helping her serve because there were a lot of rules and regulations and expectations concerning what it meant to serve guests and be a good host. All of us can identify with Martha. Jesus has always hit the nail on the head and responded to the actions of Martha, who was anxious concerning whether or not she would meet her own criteria as a good host. But Jesus replied, Martha, your anxiety is causing you to miss the gift of divine love. Mary had chosen the experience of divine love, a relationship with the revealer of divine love, the good portion. Now, let's take a moment to unpack the experience of anxiety. You know, anxiety is to the future the way guilt is to the past. And Tom Oden, in his book, Structures of Awareness, that was written 30 or 40 years ago, clarifies that guilt is wishing that I had been somebody else in the past, and anxiety is the fear that I will not be somebody that I should be in the future. Both guilt and anxiety are provoked by an image of who we should be that's determined by the rules and regulations and the expectations of others that all of us inherit in our own life. And in that inheritance, create images of who we should have been in the past, but I wasn't. So I feel guilty about that. And fear that I won't be who I should be in the future. And I'm anxious about that. You see, in the story of Martha and Mary, Martha had an understanding of what it meant to be a good host. She was so driven by that understanding that she worshiped that image to the extent that she was missing the opportunity to experience the good portion, agape love. You have your stories. Sometimes we're Mary, sometimes we're Martha. One of my favorite stories was when I witnessed a person who was driven and possessed about the plans for a local church event of the way it should be. They were angry and hurt that another person was not doing enough to implement the plans. They were nowhere to be seen. And I was asked to find that person and snatch them away from whatever they were doing and pay attention to the plans, what needed to be done for the event to be a success. I found that person engaged with a family, visiting total strangers who happened into the event. I returned to Martha in my story and shared that Mary was doing something far more important. Didn't use the terms, but the good portion. And that was more important than fulfilling the plans as scheduled. Welcoming a stranger was more important, the best portion, than seeing that every detail of the plan was implemented. Now, that is not issuing in an invitation of irresponsibility and negligence. What it issues in is when there's a choice between what we are engineered and planned to be is countered with the choice of the good portion, sharing divine love and welcoming a stranger. When that's the choice, choose the good portion. A message for Martha and a message for you and me. For Luke, in including this story, addresses a common dilemma of the string that can be attached to the journey of following Jesus. The expectations and the images of who we should be according to litany, liturgy, expectations of the community, be it secular or sacred, should not be chosen over the good portion, the experience of agape love. I recall an experience of agape love. One person I'll call Mary, she was late for a meeting. This was really irritating because she was usually there, and the disgust of the group was obvious, for they were engaged in very important business. And Mary came late. And she came late and was chastised for being late, but she was late because at breakfast across the street from the hotel where the meeting was held, she encountered a family, very poor, in distress because of an accident, and Mary took time to be present. She replaced the norm that you're always on time, because she was confronted with the choice between the good portion and being on time. You see, the good news is the gift of forgiveness in relationship to guilt, and the good news of faith in replacing anxiety. For the choice can be for the good portion of agape, empathetic, and sacrificial love. You see, in Jesus' day, the roles, the rules, the regulations were clear. Behavior was not on the basis of the freedom to choose, rather predetermined for every role and responsibility, including what it meant to be a good host and serving those who were your guest in your home. Therefore, anxiety, the fear of failure, was built into the lives of most persons, and especially women, as it came to what it meant to be a good host. Just as Jesus' life and teaching freed persons from their past with the gift of forgiveness, persons were no longer prisoners of guilt. Persons were also freed from the fear of the future with the gift of faith. No longer prisoners of anxiety, knowing that you can choose the good portion of agape love. Today, roles and expectations imprison persons into the suffocating experiences of guilt and anxiety. The invitation of Jesus is to make some room for agape love, empathy, and sacrifice, living for the other. All of a sudden, you break out of guilt and anxiety and live a life of forgiveness and faith. The word of Jesus to Martha is also a message for you and me today. Cut the suffocating string of anxiety by following Jesus, the way of agape love, the good portion available to anyone who chooses to follow Jesus. Some questions you might think about. What is your response to the understanding that anxiety is facing the future driven by the same culprit that creates guilt? An image created by oneself of who we should be rather than who we are sent to be as followers of Jesus, agents of agape love. What are your stories of personally being obsessed by anxiety? And what are your experiences observing others who are obsessed by anxiety? Sort of a relevant conversation for today. Enjoy the trip. Thank you.